5 of the Special Committee on Canada-China Relations. Pursuant to the motion adopted on Wednesday, September 23, 2020, the committee is meeting on its study of Canada-China relations. La réunion d'aujourd'hui est en format hybride, vraiment à la motion adoptée par la Chambre le 23 septembre 2020. La réunion est également télévisée et sera accessible.
Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23rd. The meeting is being televised and will be made available via the House of Commons website.
Witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are participating by video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. For the benefit of witnesses, if the minister would know this, but if one of the members is asking you questions, you don't have to wait for me to introduce you or recognize you at that point. But at some point, I will cut it off when their time is up. Je vous rappelle que toutes les interventions des membres ainsi que doivent être adressées.
I'll remind you that everything you say should be addressed to the chair. Please speak slowly and clearly.
Be on mute. I would now like to welcome the Minister for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, the Honorable Marco Mendicino. We also have with us Natasha Kim, Associate Deputy Minister, Strategic and Program Policy, as well as Dr. Nicole Giles, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Operations. Thank you for being here. We will now go to the Minister for his opening remarks. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Bonsoir, tout le monde. It is an honor to be with you all today. And thank you as well, Mr. Chair, for dispensing with the introductions of my two colleagues, Dr. Giles and Assistant Deputy Minister Natasha Kim. Let me begin with the substance of my remarks, and then I'll be happy to take questions from our colleagues on the committee. Canada remains deeply concerned about the imposition of the new national security law on Hong Kong, including recent developments in the Legislative Council. This country shares many close ties with Hong Kong, and we continue to stand with the people of Hong Kong. Le Canada demeure profondément préoccupé par l'imposition de la nouvelle loi sur la sécurité.
Canada remains deeply concerned about the imposition of the new national security law on Hong Kong, including recent developments in the Legislative Council. This country shares many close ties with Hong Kong, and we continue to stand with the people there.
Refugees and citizenship. I continue to work with all of my cabinet colleagues and indeed all members of the House, especially Minister Champagne, to address the situation and coordinate any responses we may consider. We've recently announced our new levels plan for the next 3 years, which will continue to attract the best and the brightest from around the world to help accelerate our economic recovery and drive Canada's prosperity going forward. Over the course of Canada's history, immigration has not only helped us to grow, but also to create jobs. In fact, 1 in 3 businesses with employees in Canada is owned by an immigrant. And as we fought back against this pandemic, Canadians have been grateful for the service and sacrifices made by newcomers who have played an outsized role in our response. A third of health professionals in key roles like family doctors and pharmacists come from abroad. So as we look to recovery and building the workforce that Canada needs for a prosperous future, we will continue to look for highly skilled people from around the world. In this context, I recently announced a number of measures for students and youth from Hong Kong, as well as a number of enhancements to Canada's existing immigration programs, which remain available to those living in Hong Kong and can provide pathways to settling in Canada. There are 3 areas that I would like to highlight. First, we will seek to attract recent Hong Kong graduates and workers with the skills that we need to support our economy today and going forward. Second, we will prioritize existing immigration routes for family members, students, and workers. And third, we've introduced several targeted measures to enhance the protections which are offered by our asylum system. In totality, these measures support the objectives of our new levels plan as we seek to attract the world's best and brightest. Ces mesures appuient les objectifs de notre nouveau plan de niveau.
These measures support the objectives of our new levels plans as we seek to attract the world's best and brightest.
Hong Kongers from abroad, we are going to fast-track work permits for those with recent graduate experience who wish to come to Canada to work or continue their studies. This will allow recent graduates in Hong Kong to apply for an expedited open work permit valid for up to 3 years. Eligible applicants must have graduated from a recognized Canadian or overseas post-secondary learning institution in the last 5 years. If approved, their spouse or partner, as well as children, will also be eligible to apply for a study or work permit. Of course, we don't just want them to work or study in Canada temporarily. We also want them to consider staying on, which is why we will create 2 new permanent resident pathways under this initiative, and I will highlight them now. The first stream is open to Hong Kong residents in Canada and who have graduated from a recognized Canadian learning institution in the last 3 years, having completed at least 50% of their courses in Canada. And the second stream will apply to Hong Kong residents who are in Canada and who have graduated with a degree from a Canadian learning institution or a recognized post-secondary learning institution from abroad in the last 5 years, and who have 1 year of full-time work experience in Canada within the last 3 years. Once eligible under the open 3-year work permit, Hong Kongers may then qualify under Stream 1 or 2 or other existing PR programs. These measures represent an exciting opportunity to welcome Hong Kongers who can help to build our country going forward. We plan to welcome the first eligible applicants under this program in early 2021. Ces mesures représentent une excellente occasion d'accueillir les Hong
These measures represent an exciting opportunity to welcome Hong Kongers who can help to build our country going forward. We plan to welcome the first recent graduates under this program in early 2021.
Hong Kong residents in Canada continue to have access to our asylum system. All eligible asylum claimants are afforded due process and the opportunity to make their case for needing Canada's protection. In addition, due to changing conditions in Hong Kong that could put some individuals at greater risk, we have implemented an exemption to the 12-month bar on a pre-removal risk assessment, or short form PRA, for Hong Kong nationals. Under normal circumstances, individuals who received a negative decision on their refugee claim or on a previous PRA application would not be eligible to apply for a PRA for at least 12 months. Hong Kong residents at risk of persecution who have fled to another country may also be eligible under Canada's existing resettlement programs, including the private sponsorship of refugees program and the government-assisted refugees program. Canada supports the right to peaceful protest, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly. Taking part in peaceful protests is not considered an offense in Canada. As such, arrests or convictions outside of Canada for taking part in peaceful protests are not grounds for inadmissibility to Canada. No one will be disqualified from making a legitimate asylum claim in Canada by virtue alone of having been charged under the new national security law, and neither will they be hindered in any way from availing themselves under any other immigration route. As you know, the Prime Minister has committed to a whole-of-government response to China's national security law in Hong Kong. The measures I recently announced complement measures the government previously announced, and by introducing new immigration measures, they're also complementing those efforts of our international partners, as well as building on our existing programs and pathways. We are providing options and opportunities for Hong Kong residents, which are going to support Canada's economic growth and prosperity. En introduisant de nouvelles mesures d'immigration qui complètent.
By introducing new immigration measures that also complement those of our international partners, as well as building on our existing programs and pathways, we are providing options and opportunities for Hong Kong residents that support Canada's economic growth.
We will continue to support the many connections and ties between Canada and the people of Hong Kong. Thank you for asking me to join you today, and I will be very happy to take your questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now begin our first round of questions with Ms. Dancho. For 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your remarks. Minister, you've emphasized a number of times that Canada remains gravely concerned about the situation in Hong Kong. What specifically are your grave concerns?
Well, the many developments which we have seen in Hong Kong, including the passage of the national security law, which we have condemned, as well as the most recent development involving the expulsion of 4 democratically elected legislators in Hong Kong. And it is against that backdrop in which we have both taken strong measures including the suspension of our extradition treaty as well as the announcement last week.
I'll just add to some of your comments there. As you know, the world has witnessed a live stream video of the brutal response to pro-democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong by the Hong Kong police force, who has been accused of widespread human rights abuses by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch since the 2014 umbrella movement. We also know that Chinese Communist troops of the People's Liberation Army are stationed in Hong Kong and are prepared to oppress any dissent. Are you planning to prohibit any members of the Hong Kong police force and the People's Liberation Army from immigrating to Canada under your new immigration announcement parameters or otherwise?
Well, as I said, Ms. Dancho, we have taken the step of introducing the policy, which is aimed at inviting an opportunity for young Hong Kongers, but we've also aligned two policies to enhance protections in our asylum system.
For sure, but I'm just wondering if you're going to purposely exclude or prohibit the individuals that are responsible for these actions from coming to Canada.
I was just in the process of emphasizing the inadmissibility requirements, and I've also made it clear we have a rigorous process when it comes to screening, but no one will be disqualified by virtue alone of being charged under the national security law or for committing any conduct that is not recognized under Canadian criminal law.
I appreciate that, Minister, but I think the recent national media reports regarding Operation Foxtrot and the like would possibly disagree with the rigor that is applied to some of the immigrants that are coming to Canada. We know that because of the Communist Party of China, people have been engaged, or individuals from representing this party in Canada have been engaged in vigorous campaigns of intimidation, threats, and coercion against pro-democracy Chinese Canadians and Chinese and Hong Kong nationals living in Canada. And we know one of, really the only ways that they can get into the country is through your department, through the immigration department. So have you canceled, denied, or revoked any immigration visas, such as temporary resident visas or permanent resident visas, or others for any individuals known to be unauthorized agents of the Chinese Communist Party engaged in these tactics of intimidation on Canadian soil?
Well, I just want to be clear right off the top, Ms. Dancho, as you well know, that any effort to undermine our national security through political interference or through espionage is absolutely unacceptable. And we have a robust public safety apparatus.
Have you revoked any
immigration visas? Order, Ms. Dancho. The practice generally is we allow the person answering to have at least as much question as the time is the question. So
point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair. With respect, that's not our rules, and that has been our practice. The member asking the questions has a right to control the time, and it's up to the public to judge whether the minister's answering and whether the time is.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. I'm sure Ms. Dancho will want to ensure that the minister has an opportunity to give his response. And not
Mr. Chair, I assume this isn't taking away from my precious time, this point of order. I'm paused at 3 minutes and 12 seconds, so I assume that's where we can start off again. Okay, and I just want to, on that point of order, I want to just, I believe to my colleague's point, that was during the sort of Parliament for 5 months following it being shut down really in March. But before that, it was the time as the questioner. So I just want to confirm that that's the case.
Please proceed, Ms. Dancho.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Minister, just to confirm, you can't say if you've revoked any visas for these intimidation tactics by the Communist Party of China on Canadian soil.
Well, I was in the process of giving you the broader context of what our response is to threats to national security, including through espionage. And I want to make it clear that we've got a public safety apparatus that actively investigates all of them, and we take appropriate actions where necessary. And it would not be appropriate for me to comment on any investigation.
Okay, well, I'll just leave a comment with that it doesn't seem to be working. Any tactics that your department is using based on the national news that we're hearing of what's happening to Chinese Canadians on Canadian soil. But moving on, Minister, as you're well aware, there are thousands of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong that are not residents of Hong Kong. They risk arrest and imprisonment if they try to flee Hong Kong. Your announcement really doesn't do anything for these individuals. What is your plan to support them, and do you have a plan?
Well, respectfully, I dispute that assertion. Canada has a robust asylum system. We've been recognized by the United Nations for 2 years in a row for the work that we do to uphold human rights. In addition to that, the policy announcement, Ms. Dancho, as I've now clarified on a couple of occasions, does add additional protections, which doesn't only address foreign nationals from Hong Kong. It addresses other individuals who may be active in this area and ensures that they are not disqualified by being charged alone under the national security law.
So a specific example would be, I think we were all familiar with with Grandma Wong. Alexandra Wong is a 64-year-old retiree who was arrested and detained for simply waving a British flag at a protest, and subsequently detained by the Chinese Communist government for weeks and later put under essentially house arrest for a year. Recently, she was said have reported to say that, quote, it's too late for an older woman like her to get out of Hong Kong and start a new life elsewhere, for example, Canada. Do you agree with her, Minister, that Canada's doors are closed to a person like her? And just in addition to that, I should point out that your announcement on Friday doesn't really do anything to support older pro-democracy activists and those without the financial means to attend post-secondary education. Is that correct?
Well, again, I dispute that contention, Ms. Dancho. We've created a number of pathways which we are actively promoting, including the ability to reunite with family members here. And with regards to anyone who is engaged in peaceful protest, as I said, they would not be disqualified from making a legitimate
family
asylum
reunification,
claim.
respectfully, Minister, the family reunification streams are 2 to 3 years backlogged. We'd be looking at a parents and grandparents lottery, for example, that wouldn't open up until next year. And then they wouldn't be able to come to Canada if they win that lottery and their application is approved for another 2 years. So again, your announcement doesn't.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho. Thank you, Minister. That concludes your 6 minutes. We'll go on now to Ms. Yip for 6 minutes, please.
I want to thank you, Minister, for coming to the Canada-China Committee. It's good to see you. I'd like to ask you more about the details surrounding the plan that you've put forth to help the people of Hong Kong. You mentioned in your opening remarks about specific measures for students and young people looking to resettle in Canada. Can you elaborate for us exactly why students and young people? I mean, why not others who have also supported protests but may not have the work experience or the education?
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Yip, and it is nice to see you as well. And I would just begin by saying that this is an announcement that builds on our immigration plan, which I tabled a little more than 2 weeks ago. That immigration plan is very much focused on meeting the needs of our economy, including in some very important sectors like our healthcare sector, where we have doctors and nurses and pharmacists who've been working around the clock. We believe that by announcing this initiative last week, that we will be able to tap into the skills, experience, and talent that exists in Hong Kong through a flexible work permit, and then hoping that they will make the transition to a fast-tracked permanent residency through one of the 2 streams. So I believe that this is a real opportunity. We hope that there will be young Hong Kongers who will see a desire to come to Canada to contribute. And this is also in keeping with the longstanding people-to-people ties between Canada and the people of Hong Kong.
Given the recent news about the political interference of foreign actors, are you concerned about the safety of these students coming?
Well, as I said, Ms. Yip, we have very rigorous admissibility screening to ensure that there is an immigration system that operates with integrity so that the public has confidence in. I would point out that the OECD and other organizations have consistently recognized that Canada has one of the best immigration systems in the world, if not the best when it comes to integration. And as far as international students are concerned, we have a program there that is a significant net contributor to our economy, over $21 billion a year. And I will say that in the past recent number of months, we have seen an increase in the number of applicants from Hong Kong, which is why I think our announcement last week is well timed.
I believe that Canada is a popular destination for Hong Kong students. You've been mandated by the Prime Minister to implement a new stream specifically for human rights advocates, journalists, and humanitarian workers at risk, with a target of helping resettle as many as 250 people a year. The majority of people who would become candidates for this, for the new measures just announced, would also presumably fall into the category of individuals served by human rights defenders, by the human rights defender stream. Can you elaborate for us how that stream is progressing and explain why the new streams are important?
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Yip, and I'm pleased to report to the members of the committee that the implementation of that stream is on track, and we certainly hope to have it put to ground by 2021. But the important part, I think, for you and all of our colleagues to underline is that this is a stream that builds on Canada's record as having a robust asylum system that ensures that people's human rights are upheld. And I look forward to having to say more about that in the very near future.
So in your opening statement, you also mentioned that nobody will be hindered by their pro-democracy activities. What measures is Canada taking to ensure that these activists do not have visa or asylum applications rejected for some overly broad interpretation of the national security law?
Well, again, thank you very much for the question. And as I said, we have an asylum system that is revered around the world. That asylum system ensures that people get due process. The claims that are made by those seeking safe harbor in Canada who are fleeing persecution, war, conflict are adjudicated by the Immigration and Refugee Board. That is a tribunal that operates independently from government. It ensures that there are fair hearings, and it also ensures both that the claims are adjudicated on the merits. As well, we have a number of branches who are implicated in the important work of doing all of the admissibility screening to really uphold the high degree of integrity and confidence in our immigration and asylum systems.
The Consul General of Hong Kong joined us last month, and he had talked about the immigration section of their office being one of the largest that we have anywhere in the world. And they're currently processing files for missions for other parts of the world that are unable to do the work because of COVID. For example, like countries like like Africa and South Asia. And so he mentioned that they have a lot of capacity on the ground. If there are only 60 people working in the immigration section processing those files, not just for Hong Kong and Macau, but also those places I've mentioned, is there enough capacity at the Hong Kong consulate to handle the increase in applications under the new measures?
Well, the first thing I want to do is commend the Consul General and indeed all staff at our office in Hong Kong. You're quite right that they have been stepping up and have performing in an extraordinary period of time to ensure that people are able to move across international borders, are able to access their papers. And that has been one of the contributing factors in the way in which we have seen safe and orderly immigration continue in Canada.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Yip. Et maintenant, nous avons Monsieur Bergeron pendant 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Personally, I'm very happy that you're here with us. You may know already that we began this part of our study on Hong Kong because we felt that there's real urgency given this new national security law on Hong Kong territory. And this law indeed means that anyone defending democracy in Hong Kong is now at risk. And they are trying to find safe havens somewhere. The plan that you've announced would allow a gap to be filled, a gap that we have noticed. That is, the British have set up several measures to welcome people from Hong Kong. That is, people who were living in Hong Kong at the time of the handover. But that excludes people who were not born at the time of the handover and therefore cannot take advantage of this British mechanism. However, the British Prime Minister said, or rather the Prime Minister said, that this is not necessarily a humanitarian measure. And older pro-democracy fighters, such as this older woman, what do you have for older people or people who do not have diplomas, people who are not covered by these new measures? Answer. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question.
Introduced a number of pathways which will facilitate family reunification. And I was mentioning earlier to Ms. Dancho that there are COVID-era rules that allow for visitors to come and visit immediate and broadened family members in Canada. But also we have a number of existing permanent residency pathways, both through the parent and grandparent program, as well as through other initiatives which are there to reunite families across a broad range of ages. But you're quite right. The announcement last week was tailored to young Hong Kongers and recent graduates to meet the needs of our economy today.
Je comprends de votre réponse, Monsieur le ministre, qu'il y a des...
I understand from your answer, Minister, that there are measures that will allow for family reunification. However, properly speaking, the asylum process will not allow specific measures for young people who aren't necessarily graduates, who are still studying, or older people who have taken part in pro-democracy demonstrations. You said, in fact, that taking part in a peaceful demonstration is not a crime in Canada. However, the problem is that people who have taken part in a demonstration are being accused of crimes that do exist in Canada. For example, secession. Someone who's taken part in a pro-democracy movement who is accused of sedition or secession, a crime recognized in Canada, would that person be admissible to Canadian territory?
Encore merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question. Once again, it's very important.
I would say that any claims which are made by someone seeking asylum in Canada will be adjudicated on the merits by the Immigration and Refugee Board, which, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is an independent tribunal. And with regards to screening people for inadmissibility, I'll just underline again, as I have said before, that no one will be deemed ineligible by virtue alone of having been charged under the national security law passed by China, or if they have not committed any crime that is known to Canadian law.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Vous comprendrez que je suis très préoccupé par...
Thank you. You'll understand that I'm very concerned by this declaration, this idea of taking part in a pro-democracy movement where you may have charges such as sedition, because I believe that if you organize a popular consultation, a people's consultation, this is not a crime in Canada. However, in Catalan, because the Spanish government accused a leader of organizing public consultations, the Canadian government would not allow him entry to Canada. So I wonder if someone from Hong Kong could also be refused entry to Canada for the same reasons.
Je comprends bien la distinction, monsieur.
I understand what you're saying.
Well-established principles for determining who may and may not be admissible when seeking asylum. And those principles are there to ensure the integrity of our asylum system, as well as the safety and security of the Canadian people. And so I think the vast majority of Canadians will understand that as long as you have not committed a crime known to Canadian law, then you will be eligible to make a claim in our asylum system, which will be adjudicated by our independent tribunal.
Est-ce qu'il me reste encore un peu de temps?
Do I still have any time, Chair? 20 seconds. All right. Well, it wouldn't be fair to ask the minister to answer in 5 seconds, so I'll wait for the next round.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron.
Kwan for 6 minutes. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister. I'd like to just build on that last question. So Hong Kong police have been reported to instigate violence during the Hong Kong protests, and there are no guarantee that charges for rioting are laid based on actual merit, which may be considered a crime in Canada. So can the Minister confirm that the Hong Kong protesters arrested or facing rioting or illegal assembly charges prior to the passage of the national security law are not grounds for inadmissibility?
I understand the finer point you're putting on the question, Ms. Kwan, and again, I appreciate it. I would simply reiterate the principle, and the principle is that no one will be inadmissible by being charged under the national security law alone, or if they have not committed a law have not committed any crime that is known to Canadian law. Those are well-established principles. They have served us well.
Yes, I realize that those are the talking points for the minister, but I just want to point this out to the minister's attention. According to Hong Kong Watch, around 10,000 Hong Kong protesters have been arrested prior to the passage of the national security law, and approximately 40% of those are students. And right now, as I understand it, about 400 of those have been charged with rioting. I'm very worried about whether or not those individuals would actually qualify and be able to apply for asylum. and not be deemed to be inadmissible. I asked the minister to consider this and to make necessary changes to ensure and to reassure that Hong Kongers actually get the support that they need. The answer the minister provided does not provide clarity at all. The government says that they support the people of Hong Kong, yet the minister's announcement last week, there are no refugee measures for those who are still in Hong Kong who fear persecution because of their participation in pro-democracy protests and rallies. So why did the minister not provide any refugee measures for these pro-democracy asylum seekers? Is it because the threats made by the Chinese ambassador?
Well, Ms. Kwan, we take decisions which are in the best interests of Canada. And with respect, I would say that the two policies that I announced are there to enhance the protections for those who have simply exercised their rights, including peaceful protesters, which will not be a bar. And those were concerns which were expressed by the community. Those concerns are reflected in the two policies which were part of our announcement last week.
Well, the measures are very limiting, and as the minister knows, and the groups like Canada-Hong Kong Link, Toronto Association for Democracy in China, Alliance Canada-Hong Kong, are pointing out that there are many who are under imminent risk of political persecution, but do not qualify under the new stream. So will the minister initiate a special refugee measure for the people who are currently located in Hong Kong and do not qualify under the new measures?
Well, as I said, Ms. Kwan, and I think you know, Canada's work on the international stage when it comes to granting asylum is second to none. We have been recognized by the United Nations and other. The immigration plan that I just tabled a little more than 2 weeks ago ensures that there are additional allocations for refugees, and we will continue to show leadership in this area, in addition to the two policy enhancements which were announced last week.
Surely the minister must recognize that the people in Hong Kong right now can't get to Canada to apply for asylum. That is the problem. So if you do not create a special refugee stream, they cannot access it. And so I'm going to leave it at that. I think the minister knows, and I know he's reciting talking points, but I think the minister knows what I'm talking about. And again, I urge the minister to consider bringing in special refugee measures for the people who are in Hong Kong right now. The minister also knows that the family reunification stream applies to spouses, partners, and dependent children. Parents, grandparents, reunifications, all subject to the luck of the draw. And so will the minister expand the scope of family reunification to include extended family members such as siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins?
Well, just before I answer that very quickly, I will say that notwithstanding COVID-era travel restrictions, which are necessary for the security of Canadians, we are still resettling the most urgent cases, and my colleague, Ms. Kwan, knows that. But in addition to that, I would say that we have announced 40,000 allocated spots under the parent and grandparent program. That is the most in any 2-year period, and we will certainly look forward to using those, the processing of those applications to reunite more families than others.
Canada used to actually have a immigration stream that allow for siblings to sponsor one another to come to Canada. In fact, that's how my family came, by the way, from Hong Kong. My aunt sponsored me. Will the minister consider bringing back a program like that to allow for siblings and other extended family members to sponsor their loved ones to come to Canada?
And let me just pause to say, I'm glad she did sponsor you. But I will say that it has never been easier for families to reunite. We have put an additional emphasis on processing sponsorship applications to demonstrate our commitment to family reunification. And notwithstanding the challenges of COVID-19, we are making progress. We've added resources, we're leveraging technology, and from where we were in March to where we are now, we have made progress. And I acknowledge, Ms. Kwan, that there is still more work to be done.
Well, I hope that the minister will do more than what has been announced, because as everyone has heard, the programs that the minister has announced is particularly limiting. Some of the youth, by the way, who are facing a potential arrest, have not completed their high school, and so they would not qualify. Some of them are not students. So will the minister consider bringing additional measures to really support the people of Hong Kong that have been left out by these streams?
Ms. Kwan, in addition to our plan, we've announced this initiative, which is, I think, a way in which we can expand opportunities. It speaks to the opportunities that you described.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Now we'll go to the second round. I believe it's Ms. Dancho for 5 minutes this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, pardon me. Minister, you just said something interesting. You said, quote, it's never been easier for families to reunite. I'm just wondering if the protesters outside of your office might disagree with that. But anyway, Minister, you've also said repeatedly during this committee today and also previously, no one will be prohibited from claiming asylum or applying to any other immigration program solely by virtue of having been charged under China's national security law. However, we know that there's only really a few dozen people who have been charged under the national security law, but over 10,000 were arrested and 2,000 charged for protesting, which many believe are politically motivated from the Communist Party of China. Will those charged under other protesting related charges, excluding the national security law, be permitted to come to Canada as per your announcement last week?
Well, again, I think we're going over covered ground, Ms. Dancho. There are principles that are well in place that ensures that no one will be disqualified from making a claim to our asylum system if they have not been charged, as well as a much broader set of conduct where one may be exercising their right to protest, but that does not amount to a crime known to Canadian law. And with respect to,
Minister, if I just may, on that exact point, that's my next question. Protesters in Hong Kong have been charged, for example, with rioting, unlawful assembly, and uttering seditious words. All three of these laws are laws in Canada. So as a result, and as per your remarks just now, will these protesters be denied entry into Canada?
Well, Ms. Dancho, all I can do again is reiterate what the principle is, but it is not for me to adjudicate those admissibility screening. That is a function that is performed, as you would well expect, by our public safety
but you
branch.
know the rules, right? So those are Canadian laws as well. So would they not submitted? Like, would they not be allowed to Canada then, just under what you just said? And you know the rules, so.
Ms. Dancho, I do know the rules, and I have been explaining them on a number of occasions now, and they will be applied very rigorously by our public safety branch to protect the safety and security of the Canadian people.
All right. Well, we'll just go on here. I've heard from many pro-democracy activists here in Canada that a number of activists on the front lines in Hong Kong have their travel documents often taken from them by the Chinese Communist Security Forces following an arrest and participating in protests. Grandma Wong is an example of this, and there are many others. What is your plan to help those without travel documents or those who are barred from leaving Hong Kong and China get to Canada to safety?
Well, first, I would just point out, as you heard me answer earlier to Ms. Yip, that our Consul General and all of our staff at the office in Hong Kong stand at the ready. In addition to that, under our modernized system, we have an electronic travel authorization, which can be obtained literally in minutes, which is one way in which people will be able to move from Hong Kong back to Canada if they are eligible under one of the existing pathways or under the initiative that I announced last week.
All right. So Hong Kongers with no family, though, in Canada cannot get to Canada to apply for asylum right now due to the COVID-19 travel restrictions. Obviously, they need documents to travel here, and tourism is, of course, forbidden. So are you planning to allow NGOs, for example, to provide travel documents to people stuck in Hong Kong, just like you did, for example, gay Iranians and Chechens in years past?
Well, thank you for highlighting ways in which we have demonstrated leadership on the world stage when it comes to upholding human rights. And as I was just about to say, Ms. Dancho, we work very closely with our international partners. It will come as no surprise to you that even the UNHCR and the IOM, who are some of our primary referral agencies, have also experienced disruption because of COVID. But notwithstanding that, we are resettling the most urgent cases.
All right. I just want to go back a little bit to the family reunification, particularly grandparents and parents, since you did mention that as an option for Hong Kong residents and to bring their grandparents and family members here, or parents and grandparents here. But I just want to summarize for the committee what that exactly means. So they need to wait to apply to sometime late in 2021 when the lottery opens again, since it just closed about a month ago. Then they need to win that lottery. Then they need to submit a complete application, hope that they still have access to their travel documents, which I also just talked about. And then they need to wait 2+ years for the application to be processed. And then, so really, your announcement's really saying we hope they can get here by 2023, 2024. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct.
So you're saying you're going to expedite parents and grandparents specifically for Hong Kong?
No, I was about to try and answer the first part of your question, Ms. Dancho. It's not correct. In fact, Hong Kong residents were eligible to apply under the parent and grandparent program. And quite honestly, Ms. Dancho, The record of this government in reuniting families stands in sharp contrast to the last time the Conservatives were in government. We've made tremendous progress on backlogs, and we will continue to make more going forward.
That's enough talking points. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, your time is up. Excuse me. And now we'll go on to Ms. Zan for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to committee, Minister.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. You know, Nova Scotia has a total of 13 universities and post-secondary institutions, 2 of which are in my riding of Cumberland-Colchester. And there are many Chinese students who come to study, particularly at Dalhousie's agricultural campus here in Truro. And I'm glad to see that there are announced measures that will provide ways for young students from Hong Kong to have the option of remaining in Canada, and I would say preferably here in Nova Scotia. Quite a few international students also make the choice to use the postgraduate study permit as a pathway to permanent residency. And we know that international students are excellent candidates for settlement in Canada because of their education. So can you please elaborate on what specifically is being done for the students of Hong Kong?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being such a tireless advocate for the International Student Program. And it is a great benefit not only to Nova Scotia, but right across the country. You heard me say that it contributes over $21.6 billion each year. We were able to recently revive the International Student Pathway in partnership with Nova Scotia and all of our provincial colleagues and territorial colleagues in a way that ensures that there is safe and orderly immigration. And I know that a number of schools have been approved in Nova Scotia. So hopefully we will see those students continue to contribute not only to our economy, but richly to our communities. And with regards to last week's announcement, as I mentioned, the great advantage of this announcement is that it creates flexibility, that it encourages those from Hong Kong who have recently graduated to take advantage of an open 3-year work permit. And then once here, if they fall under one of the 2 streams that I explained in my remarks, are able to apply for permanent residency and then become more quickly integrated. And the reason why that's so important is because of the needs of our economy, whether it's in health, increasingly in the tech sector. We believe we've got a real advantage here, and that's what this announcement hopes to make progress on.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. You know, here in Truro, Nova Scotia, when I was growing up, there were really only 3 families that were Chinese. And now we have many young women, young girls, including my niece, who is from China. And they grew up together in the system and had each other to fall back on, and they have integrated so well, and they're very welcome. More Chinese people are welcome here, and we love seeing them, and many of them are working, and it's really fantastic. We also celebrate the Chinese New Year and do lots of festivities like that, which is good for Nova Scotians who are not used to Chinese customs as well. Now, your department did unveil a very ambitious, I would say, and historic level of plan, making room for higher targets of newcomers into the country, which we obviously need because we are an aging society. And here in Nova Scotia, we are definitely aging. We need immigrants. So immigration has always been the right choice in my books, and more people in Canada will strengthen our communities. So can you explain how these measures for residents of Hong Kong actually fit into your levels plan?
Well, they will help to contribute in meeting the bold levels which we have set out in it. And they come at a moment in time where we want to accelerate our economic recovery and create jobs. And I will simply take the opportunity to emphasize that immigration does create economic growth. It does create more jobs. And that's how this announcement, this initiative, we believe will help to meet the important economic needs when it comes to our healthcare sector. You know, we talk about how our doctors, our nurses, our support workers are working around the clock. As we confront a second wave, they need a second shift. And this is where immigration really can contribute, where we can align the skill set that exists abroad as well as within our borders. I've also taken the opportunity in conjunction with our plan to point out that we have domestic temporary immigration in Canada. I think most Canadians understand that when immigrants are rolling up their sleeves and are helping to contribute to our response to COVID-19, that it really does allow us an opportunity to consider accelerating their pathway to becoming Canadian. That will be good for us all in the long run.
So
thank you very much, Ms. Zan.
another one.
Sorry,
no worries.
It's 4:55, so you really have
fine.
time for a question. Sorry.
That's okay.
Et maintenant, M. Bergeron, pendant 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Mr. Bergeron, Chair, first of all, Minister, having myself held ministerial positions, I do have some empathy for what you're experiencing here with some of our colleagues tonight. I believe that ministers are always driven by the best intentions, want to do the best for their populations. So thank you for everything you've set up to date. However, I understand that there may be some elements that need to be developed that you may want to reflect upon after the conversation this evening. And I hope that we'll be able to come up with proposals for you that will help you develop complementary measures for the benefit of pro-democracy advocates who wish to find safe haven in Canada. I'd like to go back to the appearance of the Consul General for Hong Kong, Canadian Consul General for Hong Kong and Macau. Now, there's always this idea of having to have plans in case of any eventuality. Now, we asked him, do you have a plan in place if ever you need to welcome a large number of refugees? His answer, well, it seemed that he does not have such a plan, and that he couldn't assume what the government would decide. Since you're here and we can have the answer directly from the horse's mouth, is there something that you are doing that would eventually allow the Consul General of Hong Kong, the Canadian Consul General, to plan for a large number of refugees at the consulate? Answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Bergeron, for your support. I appreciate your support as a former minister.
Of course, as I have said, we are very grateful to our Consul General in Hong Kong for all of the work that they are doing on the ground there to ensure that we can facilitate the travel of people from Hong Kong to Canada. They are performing exceptionally well under very challenging circumstances. And as I have also mentioned in the past, the Canadians who are there enjoy a right of return, and we will facilitate that whenever they wish.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll now go to Ms. Kwan for 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just turn to this issue for a second. The government's website states that, quote, Hong Kong residents at risk of persecution who fled to another country may also be eligible under Canada's existing resettlement programs, including those private sponsorship of refugee programs and the government-assisted refugee programs. So does that include the Five Eyes countries? And since private sponsorships must have a refugee status determination, how will they be eligible under this stream?
Well, Ms. Kwan, thank you for highlighting an alternative route by which one may make a claim. I will say that this work, in particular in this alternative route that you just identified, is done in conjunction with those countries as well as with our international partners. And the important point is that, as I have said, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID, we have still been able to resettle the most urgent cases, and that will occur as well in these alternate routes where necessary.
Sorry, the minister actually didn't answer my questions. And would the people of Hong Kong be considered as the most urgent cases?
Well, each and every one of those cases will be assessed on the merits. And so we have established a precedent whereby we do prioritize situations where individuals are at greater risk. And as I said, each one will be determined on the unique facts and circumstances of the case.
So how will people be able to get their refugee status determination?
Well, first, We will work with our international partners, including the UNHCR and IOM, for referrals. Where there are very exigent circumstances, we will prioritize those cases as we've had. And in cases where individuals file claims here, they will be adjudicated by the Immigration and Refugee Court.
They would need the UNHCR designation. Does that include the 5 countries?
Well, again, Ms. Kwan, we will work with our international partners, and on occasion we work with other partners as well.
Sorry, I wish I could just get a straight up answer, Minister. It's not a difficult question, really. All right, I'm going to move on, though. The pathways that the Minister highlighted, the second pathway is for those who's graduated from post-secondary institutions in Canada. And then under the first stream is for people who have received a year of authorized work experience in Canada. So that means they must be here in Canada already. So there's no programs really for students that are abroad in Hong Kong right now.
I'm afraid that that's all the time we have for Ms. Kwan. Now we're on to Mr. Chong for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for appearing. My first question is, should Canadians living in Hong Kong leave Hong Kong?
Well, those are decisions which will be taken by Canadians who are there.
So you're not urging them to leave Hong Kong.
I'm saying that those decisions will be taken by Canadians.
You're not okay. Thank you. We know that, and the government knows that China is conducting covert and subversive influence operations here in Canada and in other democracies, some of which involve the monitoring and direction of Chinese students on visas. Minister, you said earlier in your appearance in front of our committee that Canada has a rigorous screening system for approving visas for students studying here in Canada. Several incidents last year in the Greater Toronto region belie that assertion, one at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus and the other one at McMaster University. At U of T Scarborough, Kemi Lamo, a Canadian of Tibetan origin, received death threats from Chinese visa students studying at U of T Scarborough simply for being elected as U of T Scarborough student president, causing her to worry about her safety and prompting the University of Toronto to take measures to protect her. Have any of those students had their visas revoked?
Well, Mr. Chong, I have said before that any effort to undermine national security through espionage or other interference is unacceptable, and we do have a public safety apparatus to address that. And with regards to other conduct that may be against the law, look, as a former prosecutor, I would want those.
I understand that, but have any of those students had their visas revoked for threatening, for conveying death threats to a woman at the University of Toronto?
Mr. Chong, you've heard me reiterate now on a number of occasions that conduct that amounts to espionage.
I know that. I understand that. I'm asking you, if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I just want to know if any of those students have had their visas revoked.
Mr. Chong, it would not be appropriate for me to comment on any case.
Okay, thank you. Well, and the second question, last year at McMaster University, the Chinese Students and Scholars Association had its privileges stripped as an official club because its members disrupted a speech at McMaster by Ricky Turdish, a Uyghur Muslim. They threatened her by reporting her to the Chinese consulate on St. George Street in Toronto. Have any of those students involved with threatening the safety and life of another woman at McMaster University had their visas revoked?
Mr. Chong, it would not be appropriate for me to comment on any individual case, but I will reiterate the concerns that I've mentioned before around interference and espionage and breaking the law here in Canada.
Some individuals who wish to leave Hong Kong face exit control. All individuals leaving Hong Kong face exit controls, and some of those individuals have been denied exit. For example, some of them have had their passports taken away from them. Is Canada prepared to issue temporary resident permits or other travel documents to those individuals if necessary?
Well, we take every application on the merits and we determine whether or not they're admissible or whether or not they're eligible under one of the existing immigration routes, including COVID era, including the announcement last week.
But what if they can't leave Hong Kong to get to Canada to make an asylum claim? Is your department, through the consulate in Hong Kong, prepared to issue temporary travel documents to those individuals?
Mr. Chong, as I said earlier, the Consul General and staff there are working very, very difficult, in very challenging circumstances, but they will facilitate where they can and where eligible, and as long as they meet admissibility requirements.
Another related question. for those individuals who can't leave Hong Kong because they cannot obtain travel documents or because of other barriers from them exiting Hong Kong, is your department, through the consulate, prepared to allow those individuals to make their claims from Hong Kong?
Well, we have an established process, and as I have said, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID, we have still found ways to resettle the most urgent cases. And as I've said as well, the Consul General will stand along with our staff at the ready to provide support where we can.
Well, I'll just finish with a comment, Mr. Chair. The minister fails to acknowledge that the minister's announcement of last week and the other pathways available don't capture all the situations that Hong Kongers find themselves in. And so there's not a great degree of flexibility for those who wish to leave Hong Kong, who find themselves in these unique circumstances as a result of the imposition of this draconian national security law.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chong. That concludes your time. And now Mr. Oliphant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank the minister as well for his graciousness. We know that under the rules of committees, there are two things, and it's the requirement of a witness to answer questions. And quoting from Mr. Bosk in the manual, it says very clearly that members are also urged to display appropriate courtesy and fairness, which I think we have been missing from time to time in this meeting. That being said, there was an intimation by one of the members of the committee that people who are accused or guilty of human rights abuses would be allowed to come into Canada. My understanding is that, first of all, that is not the responsibility of the Minister of Immigration to do security checks. That is public safety and that department. However, is there any credible understanding that you will be allowing people into this country who do not pass security checks?
No, and thank you for the question, Mr. Oliphant.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was clear on the record that this government has no intention of allowing anybody who has broken the law or is a security risk to Canada into the country. Thank you. I want to get into the last sort of part of the announcement, which has to do with PRAWs. And I will confess that as a member of Parliament, PRAWs are one of those horrible things to understand that I have to deal with quite regularly. And I just want to unpack a little bit about what this really means, that if someone somehow has made a claim for asylum and the IRB makes a decision that denies it, and then normally we do a risk assessment as a government, that is done to see whether that person really can return home. I understand that now you will be able to have more latitude with respect to PRAWs, and that they will be able to reapply to be able to stay in Canada longer while their situation is determined. Could you explain that a bit to us?
First, I commend you for doing your homework on what is a very esoteric part of immigration law, Mr. Oliphant. But in short form, the protection that we have introduced last week will waive the usual 1-year period that a failed asylum claimant from Hong Kong would have to wait until filing an application for a pre-removal risk assessment. And so in practical terms, what this means is that without having to wait that period, if they are a failed asylum claimant, they may have another chance to stay in Canada as a result of the assessment.
Now, just for to live up to my reputation of not always being nice to my own government, I do want to ask you whether the IRB has or will have the sufficient resources to actually undertake the work that could be required if Hong Kong citizens are seeking asylum in Canada. Do you have the resources to actually get the IRB to be able to work? I know they've had to retool for COVID, but tell us, have you got the money?
Well, certainly we have invested under our government's border enforcement strategy significant funds to ensure that the Immigration Refugee Board can meet the capacity. I will say that I believe that we have the capacity to meet the demand, and we would like to ensure that there are more resources going forward in addition to the plan that I filed. We also do look to continue to show world leadership when it comes to resettling refugees. As I said, Mr. Oliphant, the United Nations has recognized our role in this space now for 2 years, and I know that it's in large part because of the generosity and the compassion that has been shown by Canadians.
Would you appreciate it if this committee actually recommended that you had the resources to ensure that the IRB can meet the possible demand of this difficult situation for Hong Kongers seeking asylum in Canada?
I would certainly not turn down the offer of support. Thank you, Mr. Oliphant.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliphant, and thank you, Minister, for appearing today. I understand your officials will be staying with us for the remaining hour. Good to have you with us this evening.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jennings, point of order.
Yeah, I wanted to just make sure the minister was aware that the committee had requested him for 2 hours, and this committee, I think, has other questions. If the minister is able to stay, in any event, I did want to make sure he was aware of that request and given the opportunity to stay longer if he wished to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly am open to returning if the committee sees fit at a point in time in the future.
Thank you, Minister. With that, we'll go on to Ms. Dancho with questions for the officials for 6 minutes in the second hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so thank you to the officials for being here today. I know you're working diligently to improve the situation for those in Hong Kong that we are able to within the limitations of the announcement last week. So I have a few broad data-related questions I'm hoping you could answer. How many eligible Hong Kong residents do you expect to apply for these new economic streams?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I can start with that one, and my colleague, Dr. Giles, may wish to add. At the moment, I mean, we can't necessarily predict with any certainty what the volumes will be, just because of the current pandemic situation in particular. Certainly with travel and global travel the way it is, I think there's some likelihood that people may be, assessing options at this point in time and deciding how to make their plans. So at the moment, we can't predict with any certainty, but the stream would be open.
May I specify? Sorry, pardon me for interrupting. Could I specify? Maybe you have a better idea. Do you expect the bulk of them to be from Hong Kong, as in currently in Hong Kong now, or do you anticipate that most of them will be just those who are in Canada already?
So given the way the new measures have been designed, Mr. Chair, there's actually both avenues for those who are already in Canada. And we do have some information there that there's approximately 7,000 who hold valid study or work permits who would be possibly in Canada, although we don't know if they may have left during the last few months. And then there are also streams where Hong Kongers from abroad would be able to apply for that open work permit and be able to come in that way.
So you're not quite sure, though, how many, there's 7,000 currently in Canada that hold that may be eligible, but you're not sure how many from Hong Kong would be coming. So your department wasn't able to do any modeling to ensure we can sort of take that capacity in. So you don't really know how many would be coming from Hong Kong.
So estimates at this stage would be largely speculation, I would say, just because of the variables at play. One of those variables, as mentioned, pandemic situation. The other one would be the domestic conditions in Hong Kong.
Can you estimate how many individuals are excluded from applying to your new economic immigration program because they do not meet sort of the restrictions, like the standard restrictions under education, age, financial requirements, etc., that are, again, pretty standard and would be applied to these even in the special stream? Do you know how many that would be excluded? Pardon me.
So actually, these would be quite facilitative measures, as the minister outlined, targeted to complement what we already have in terms of many immigration options to come to Canada, both on a temporary and a permanent basis. So while these ones would be targeted to recent graduates from Hong Kong, certainly they would complement our existing immigration pathways.
Okay. do you know how many of the 10,000 invitations to apply through the 2020 Parents and Grandparents Lottery program went to sponsors seeking to bring their Hong Kong-based parents to Canada?
So for that question, I may turn it to my colleague, Dr. Giles. Because that program was just launched, the notice of interest to apply were received. So we may not have those figures at this stage. It may be too recent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify that we are in the process of validating which of those applications are complete, so we do not yet have any specifics on the application packages themselves.
Can you tell us how many got through the lottery, though?
Not at this point, no. We're still in the process of doing that work.
Is the department able to commit to tabling that to the committee when you have those numbers? How many, again, just to reiterate, how many were approved under this year's 2020 Grandparents and Parents Lottery? How many were from Hong Kong? Can you commit to tabling that to the committee?
Mr. Chair, if you agree, the department can certainly bring that back if that's of interest to the committee.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Just a little bit more general, I believe currently the immigration website says that the spousal, and again, this plays into how long it's going to take to get Hong Kong folks to Canada. The spousal sponsorship program, currently 12 months, all of the experts, particularly immigration lawyers and the like that we've talked to, and people who've experienced are in the midst and grips of the spousal sponsorships say that 12 months is not accurate. So do you have a more accurate number of how long the spousal sponsorship wait is?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We recognize that family reunification very much remains a priority for us. We have introduced a pilot to digitize spousal applications, which will facilitate the review of these applications and allow our officers both in Canada and abroad to process remotely. We've also increased the number of decision makers on spousal applications by 66% to increase the application of the assessments more quickly and to reduce the wait times. We are aiming to process approximately 6,000 spousal applications each month from October to December 2020. Combined with processing to date, this rate will lead to about 49,000 decisions by the end of the year.
I just want to go over something I spoke with the minister about, and just to summarize, this is the Grandparents and Parents Lottery, and there's a lot of interest in this, is why I keep asking. This is the process that we understand. If they didn't make it into the lottery this fall, then I'll go quickly. Thank you, Chair. They have to apply for the lottery in fall 2021, win the lottery, submit a complete application, hope that they still have their travel documents, wait 2+ years for the application process, and then hope to get to Canada in 2023-24. Is that accurate?
Well, I'm sure there isn't time.
Could she just answer just briefly?
If you can answer with yes or no, I'm sorry. I don't want to put you in that position. I know you would, but I don't want to put her in that position. But can we have a very brief answer?
Thank you.
Grosso modo, that does seem like the process, correct?
Thank you for being very, very brief. That's much appreciated. And now, maintenant, on va procéder avec Monsieur Dubourg.
Mr. Dubourg now. Thank you, Chair. It's my chance now to thank the Associate Administrative Deputy Ministers for being here with us, Dr. Giles and Ms. Kim. This is a very important topic that we're discussing. My first question, I saw in the announcement made by the minister last week, and he mentioned it again this evening, that there is a certain number of openings for an expedited process. For example, for graduates and their families, also for asylum seekers. In his speech, however, he also said that under normal circumstances, people who have already received an unfavorable decision with regard to their asylum claim or a previous PRRA, pre-removal risk assessment, normally would not be admissible for 12 months. Why is there this measure? Why is it necessary to specify this?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. I'll be answering in English.
So in terms of the measure, the PRA-BAR exemption, as we call it, so in the normal course someone's had a failed claim, so they've been found to not be eligible for asylum by the IRB or by the federal court if it's gone there. Normally, there would be a 12-year period where they could not apply for what's called a pre-removal risk assessment. And given that country conditions have changed, as the minister announced, there is an exemption to that usual 12-month bar, so that those from Hong Kong will now be able to apply for that pre-removal risk assessment. That means, as the minister stated, practically speaking, that they cannot be removed. They would have a chance to actually apply for that risk assessment, so that before any removal happens, the risks against them could be assessed.
Merci. Écoutez, je sais que bon.
Thank you. I know that we have a very robust immigration system here in Canada. Checks are made. There are checks and balances. At the same time, there is an element of empathy to this system. You know this, that previously with Zimbabwe and Haiti, measures were taken by the government to assist the people from those countries in making their requests. I see that with Hong Kong, the minister has waived costs of applications. People will not have to pay to become residents here. I'm wondering to what extent you will be reviewing the programs already in place to be able to provide help to Hong Kongers so that they can come contribute to the Canadian economy. I remember when we talked of Syrians and we welcomed a lot of them. Today, many have businesses, contribute to the economy. Have you done everything you can to help Hong Kongers with the applications?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that is a good point in terms of the measures that were announced by the minister last week. There were a range of measures that both were aimed at not only showing solidarity with Hong Kongers, but also in terms of highlighting, as the minister did, the economic objectives of our levels plan. So when we look at the measures that were implemented in terms of a fee waiver for those Hong Kongers who are in Canada and wish to extend their stay, that is one that can facilitate their stay here in Canada. The PRABAR exemption that we just spoke about is another one. The new pathways that the minister highlighted, both for the open work permit, which is a temporary pathway, but also the new permanent resident streams for young Hong Kong graduates. These would be new measures to complement the ones that we already have for those who are abroad. So definitely there's a suite of things that are being proposed to facilitate Hong Kongers both in Canada and abroad.
Yes, thank you, merci. Écoutez, je sais que c'est pas.
Thank you. I know that this doesn't necessarily fall under the immigration portfolio, but when it comes to security, well, I've talked about how sound our immigration program is, how robust it is. I understand that there are checks of the security record, for example, that's part of the measures that make the system robust? Or is it that you're easing up on these checks to help people who have been persecuted?
Thank you for the question. As the minister stated, we do have an existing framework in place when it comes to both security and admissibility. That won't be changing, but as that framework sets out, there's rules around that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kim. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Dubois. Et maintenant, Monsieur Bergeon, pendant 6 minutes.
Mr. Bergeon, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for staying with us at this late hour. It's much appreciated. As I said to the minister during our last exchange, there is still things to be developed. I understand that you're working on that right now. There are things that we'll be recommending that you may wish to follow up on. One element raised by our colleagues and myself is that although we are willing to welcome human rights defenders, journalists, people who are worried about their safety given this new national security law, we don't see how, for the time being, the minister has put anything in place to deal with an extraordinary number of asylum requests from Hong Kong. Now, I asked the minister this very question a few minutes ago. This was a question we asked also of the Consul General, the Canadian Consul General in Hong Kong. Is something being done to ensure that a bigger demand, a greater demand for asylum in Canada be met for people who wish to find safe haven here?
Thank you for the question. I'll start by saying that, again, there are many pathways when it comes to Canada's immigration system. For the protection pathways that are available, as highlighted, there are the resettlement pathways. So if someone, based on our legal framework, which models the UN Convention on Refugees, if someone has no other durable solution and then they've fled their home country, they would be eligible for resettlement either by referral by the UNHCR or by private sponsors who have agreed to sponsor them. So that is Canada's general framework when it comes to the resettlement of refugees. For the in-Canada asylum process, someone who's in Canada can apply for asylum, and those protections exist here, and that process is there by the IRB, the Immigration Refugee Board. In addition to that, the other economic streams, as well as family reunification streams, and the new measures that were announced last week, would be there to provide pathways for those who are in Hong Kong, be able to find ways to Canada as well.
Oui, sauf que comme je l'évoquais plus tôt.
Yes, but as I said earlier, the ministers admitted that the measures announced last week are not humanitarian measures, but rather economic measures. And I said this earlier with the minister. We decided to start this study on Hong Kong because it's urgent. I believe, or I fear, that the current mechanisms may not be able to meet the demand given this new national security law. We raised, for example, the possibility, we raised this with the Consul General, the possibility that a person wishing to seek refuge in Canada who shows up at the Consulate General, well, given the current legislation, will that person receive asylum? Or are we simply going to turn him or her away? And this person may indeed be arrested by the Hong Kong authorities.
So, Mr. Chair, within the existing international framework, when someone is in country, in general, that they become the responsibility of their home country. So a suite of efforts, both by the international community as well as other states, can be engaged in terms of diplomatic efforts to impact that situation. From an immigration standpoint, we do not accept asylum claims in missions abroad from those who are still in country, but our resettlement pathways exist, and we work closely with our international partners, such as the UNHCR, to facilitate that.
La raison pour laquelle on a demandé au ministre de...
The reason we asked the minister to appear before us today, and you as well, is that we have the impression that we'll have to go further, and this was recognized by the minister. We have to go much further than what, with our measures than what we currently have. there will be an extraordinary demand in Hong Kong because of the application of the national security law. Our concern as parliamentarians, and I hope you've properly understood this, is that our concern is whether there is something being done beyond the normal measures to respond to an increased demand, and a demand that does not fit the current framework.
10 seconds.
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of the last comment, certainly there are these measures that are being taken, including the new pathways that were announced, that can have both humanitarian and economic benefits at the same time.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bergeron. Ms. Kwan, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials. My first question is really just to try and get some basic information. I wonder if the officials can provide the following information to the committee. How many Hong Kongers have been granted refugee status in Canada to date since 2019, and how many are in process? What is the average processing time? And for those waiting processing, are they granted an open work permit? And what is the wait time for them to get a open work permit? And are there additional resources provided to facilitate expeditious processing of these applications? And if yes, how much?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll try to capture most of those. So in terms of the number of refugee claims that were made in 2019 to 2020, the number is 0. In terms of asylum claims for 2020 year until September 30th, we did have approximately 30 claims in the system. While people are awaiting their claims being processed, they are able to work in Canada, and they also receive other supports. I'm sorry, can you please repeat the other questions?
I wonder if I can get the answers to these questions to be tabled to the committee so I can get on with the other questions, if that's okay. And so all those other questions will be on the Hansel record. So I'm going to move on to the next questions then, if I can. The government says that they will support the 3,000 Canadians that are in Hong Kong right now. And there appears to be conflicting reports as to whether or not Canadians abroad have been able to seek consular support. So I wonder if the officials can advise if the Canadian government has made any effort to check in on Canadians, and particularly those who might be active in the pro-democracy movement, to see if they are safe.
Thank you very much for the question. So Global Affairs Canada is Canada's lead on providing protection to Canadian citizens and permanent residents abroad, but of course we work very closely with them to provide support services. The Consul General in Hong Kong remains ready and has been providing ongoing passport and citizenship services to our clients, and there has been no break in that service being provided even during the global pandemic. Until September 30th, our IRCC offices in Hong Kong have issued nearly 5,000 passports to Canadian citizens this year. We've also supplied our office in Hong Kong with a large number of emergency travel documents, and mitigation plans are in place to ensure that passport and citizenship services continue to be provided. And I understand there's been a significant amount of outreach done to Canadians in Hong Kong to ensure that they have the travel documents that they require.
Sorry, I think my question was whether or not the Canadian government has proactively reached out to Canadians that are abroad to see if they're safe. So not the other way around, for them to reach into to touch base with the Canadian officials for consular support. But have we proactively reached out to anyone in Hong Kong?
Throughout the last year, Canada's mission has completed a robust outreach campaign encouraging Canadian citizens studying, working, and living on Hong Kong to ensure that they have the correct and valid travel documents. So there's been quite significant outreach, yes, to Canadians.
So we've reached out to them to see if they have the appropriate travel documents.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And have we reached out to them to see whether or not they have any safety concerns?
Global Affairs Canada is lead on providing the protection. I'm not sure about the content of non-immigration related issues.
Okay, I wonder if the officials can try and find that answer from their colleagues in Global Affairs. The student program is limited to students who have graduated from a post-secondary institution in Canada in the last 5 years. So what happens if you're only in year one in a 4-year program? Will they be able to apply after they complete their post-sec education? And is there a time limit for the program?
So final details on the pathways that have been announced will be available soon, but the intent would be that these pathways would be available for a number of years, and there would be a window through which those who are eligible could apply. But those final details will be released when they're available.
So we won't know until 2021.
For the permanent resident pathways, those are expected in 2021. For the open work permit temporary pathway, we're aiming to have that in place before the end of the year.
I see. The government website states that, quote, Hong Kong residents at risk of persecution who have fled to another country may also be eligible under Canada's existing resettlement programs, including the private sponsorship of refugee programs and the government-assisted refugee programs, end quote. I asked the minister of this question. Does that include the 5 countries?
So each case, as the minister stated, would be assessed on its merits, and we would follow the legal framework that's in place for Canada, which is based on the international definition, which is grounded in there not being another durable solution available.
So that means it does not include the 5 countries.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kwan. And we'll go on now to the second round, and we have Mr. Williamson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the witnesses being here today. I'm just turning on my clock there so I can be a little closer to the mark. I'd like to return to some of my colleague, Mr. Chong's questions to the minister that involved revoking student visas on individuals from abroad who harass, intimidate, or threaten others in this country. The minister was not prepared for privacy reasons to discuss specific cases, but could you talk about the process? How does your department track that? How is it reported? What's the process where someone who is here as a visitor could be expelled for actions that Canada deems to be unacceptable?
So I can start, Mr. Chair, and my colleague, Dr. Giles, may wish to expand on this. In terms of the general framework, as the minister stated, these would definitely be matters that are handled on a case-by-case basis. And certainly there would be due process involved throughout that process to ensure that we had the right evidence. But I'll hand it over to my colleague for expansion.
Thank you for the question. So if indeed there is conviction for criminality, at that point there's an assessment done in terms of whether the visas should be revoked. And then there's also the due process, as my colleague indicated, prior to removal taking place, ensuring as well if an individual is removed from the country that they won't come under harm's way once they're returned to their home country.
That's interesting. So there has to be a conviction. It's a very high threshold. Then is that correct? It's not just the department doesn't do its own investigation to determine that individuals were behaving in a threatening or intimidating or perhaps even violent fashion, but a police conviction's required.
So I can start, Mr. Chair. So in general, a conviction would be clear evidence of an inadmissibility that would apply in a case like this.
Sorry, so go ahead, please.
perhaps to clarify as well that IRCC does not have investigative powers.
Okay. So there's no reporting mechanism within the department. It would become a police matter, and then it would be picked up. I'm trying to understand the process that an individual could go to. So perhaps bring it down to kind of a micro level. If there's a Hong Kong, I'll call it a citizen in Canada today at school, and this person is threatened, harassed by others, what would the process be? Would it be could this person approach your department, or is it a police matter?
So, Mr. Chair, perhaps we can return to the committee with some clearer details on this. I can speak in general terms that any criminal issue would be a police of local jurisdiction matter. In terms of the admissibility and the validity of that student permit, there would be both terms and conditions attached to that permit that would fall under IRCC's mandate. In addition, there would be admissibility concerns that we could also look at.
Okay. I'd appreciate that if you're able to provide the committee some more background, because the minister certainly left the impression that he was not able to talk about the procedures because of privacy issues, and now I'm left with the belief that perhaps the department just is not in the business of examining behavior that we wouldn't expect, or we would not want visitors to this country to engage in by threatening or intimidating others who are here for studies or for any other reasons. But I think I'll leave it at that. Then, Mr. Chair, I'm out of time, and I know you like to keep firm watch on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your assistance on that, Mr. Williamson. And now we'll go on to Mr. Prajaskatos for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I'm very interested in the extent to which multilateral approaches can be of assistance here in terms of Canada's approach to China generally, but also specifically the matter of and challenge of Hong Kong. The question is, with respect to the recent policy announcement that's been made and explained here tonight, to what extent did the government consult with and reach out to like-minded allies, whether at the United Nations or the Five Eyes partners that we have, or both? Can you speak about that international coordination, if there was any, and what it looked like?
Thank you for the question. In terms of Canada's cooperation with other Five Eyes countries in particular, there is regular and in-depth consultation with them on a range of immigration matters. So our Five Eyes partners, we have a group called the Migration Five, and we regularly discuss different immigration matters of interest. So in terms of these particular measures, certainly we were aware what other partners were doing in this space, and Canada announced its measures in a fashion that was complementary to what was being done.
But specifically on this particular matter, to what extent did discussions take place? I just think it's important to push on this, simply because we've heard witness after witness emphasize the importance of multilateral engagement between countries on the matter. So are we, when the idea of doing something in terms of what we've ultimately seen materialize with respect to asylum issues and the like, were we engaged with Britain? Were we engaged with New Zealand, Australia, so on and so forth, like-minded allies? Can you shed any light on that?
Yes, as mentioned, we regularly engage with all of those Five Eyes partners. So Australia, New Zealand, the US, as well as the UK. So as you know, the UK and Australia had announced measures in the space of migration. So certainly we were following that closely. And then in developing these measures, we were mindful of what existed in those other countries.
Looking at it from a domestic perspective, in terms of the overall policy construction of what what materialized. How did the policy come together? Obviously, it's COVID-19 on the one hand. We're experiencing rather COVID-19. It makes things challenging in any policymaking environment. But can you speak at all to how this policy, how these different policy decisions were arrived at? Consultations, for example, engagement with experts, anything along those lines. How did it all come together?
So as noted, certainly we had conversations with allies and like-minded allies in terms of what was developing in their initiatives, and looked at other contexts around the world. Obviously, some consultations with stakeholders on the ground as well, and looking at what would be a measure that could be put in place to complement what already exists in Canada's immigration system.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say on the ground, Ms. Kim, you're speaking domestically here in Canada?
As well as just abroad as well.
Okay.
But certainly these measures were intended to complement what we already have. As noted, we have a broad suite and array of pathways available. So these ones were very much targeted to be facilitative for the best and the brightest population, and complement our levels plan as well.
Thank you very much. Final question, Mr. Chair. In recent days, the Globe and Mail has published a few articles that have taken some by surprise and are of great concern. And I'm speaking specifically about CSIS's recent statement making clear that Chinese state officials have been engaged covertly in a campaign of intimidation against either real or perceived Chinese dissidents here in Canada. And certainly I would expect that would include Hong Kongers as well. To what extent is IRCC involved in vetting individuals who could be engaged in this activity? Well, let me rephrase
Very
that.
briefly.
What is the vetting process like?
Ms. Kim, a very brief answer, please.
The security vetting process for admissibility is done by our public safety partners in consultation with us.
Thank you so much. And maintenant, thank you, Mr. Fragiskatis. Et maintenant, Monsieur Bergeron, pendant 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Mr. Bergeron, you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair. Sometimes I'm somewhat puzzled by the answers provided by senior officials that may annoy parliamentarians. When I say, do you plan to have anything other than existing mechanisms? I'm answered, the mechanisms will be what's used. In 2020, there will be a new stream for refugees to provide safe haven to human rights defenders, journalists, and other people who may be at risk of being persecuted. Now, this is a direct quote from your department. I specifically chose those words that were published by your department. So what are you working on to go further with the current mechanisms, and in doing so provide safe haven to journalists and human rights defenders?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So to clarify, and apologies if answers are sometimes puzzling, but first I would say that we do have our existing resettlement programs, which really focus on the most vulnerable and those who are facing persecution, and that can include persecution based on political opinion. So if there is a referral on that basis, which could include a human rights defender, we can accept those claims already, but I would note that we don't currently track those in a systematic way. In referring to the Minister's mandate commitment around creating a new stream for human rights defenders, as he noted, we are hoping that can be announced soon. Implementation is underway in the design as well, but this would be a way to advance that specific commitment for this population.
Est-ce qu'il me reste encore un peu de temps, Monsieur le Président, ou c'est...
Do I still have time, or is that it? 15 seconds. All right. Once again, I'll ask the witnesses to answer in 5 seconds. I will not ask them to answer in 5 seconds, rather.
Bergeron, Ms. Kwan, for 2.5 minutes, please.
Am I up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please. 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. For individuals who have fled to another jurisdiction, can they go to the Canadian Embassy to seek support for refugee support? So, for example, if they fled to Japan or Taiwan, since the Five Eyes countries they would not be eligible, would they be able to go to the Canadian Embassy for help? And how would they be able to submit their application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So Canadian embassies and consulates are not able to accept refugee claims. If a refugee has fled their home jurisdiction and does not have a durable solution in another country, they can be referred to us by the UN for resettlement under our Government Assistant Refugees Program. They can also receive private sponsorship to come to Canada through the private refugee sponsorship stream.
Well, even at the private sponsorship stream, they would still need refugee determination from UNHCR. So they have to contact the UNHCR first.
There are other mechanisms for referral as well, although primarily through the UNHCR.
What are the other mechanisms?
There are some specific cases where we can work with other agencies to identify that they are indeed refugees and are requiring urgent protections.
I wonder if I could have the officials table that detailed information to the committee so that we can actually have access to that information, please. So I'm going to move on to the next question. The only change that's been announced for the refugee asylum seekers is that the 1-year wait period would be waived for Hong Kongers whose asylum claim was denied by the IRB between November 13, 2019 to November 12, 2020. Why would the deadline be November 12, 2020? So let's say, for example, if someone was denied today, they would not be able to be eligible for the 1-year waiver of the asylum claim. Why is that?
So the PROBAR exemption, as we call it, is reflective of changed circumstances in the country of alleged persecution. So it's really backward-looking to waive that 12-year period that someone would have to wait. If we're looking at November 12th and onward, November 12th, 2020, and onward, then that would already take into account the changed circumstances in the country in terms of the IRB decision.
Thank you.
Are there
Thank you
other
very
changes?
much. Thank you, Ms. Kwan. And now we'll go on to Ms. Dancho for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to be splitting my time with Michael MP Chong. So I'm just going to put my thing on here so I don't run over his time. All right, so one of my questions, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of my other colleagues, what they had asked. They mentioned there was no reporting mechanism for if the immigrants are in Canada and they do happen to engage in these intimidation tactics. And then it was, another of our colleagues sort of got to the next question I was going to ask, but didn't quite get an answer. So I just want to reiterate that. What is the mechanism to sort of screen out these folks from getting those immigration visas to come to Canada? Just want to sort of give you an opportunity to answer that more fulsomely.
Thank you very much for the questions. So first, in terms of the screening before arriving in Canada, there's quite a robust security screening procedure that's in place that is conducted by our public safety partners. And that includes, as you would imagine, ensuring that and looking for evidence of criminality, of human rights abuses in other countries that these individuals might have committed. If there are crimes that people are committing while they are visitors in Canada, so while they're temporary residents or elsewhere, there is a reporting mechanism whereby if people are found to have evidence of criminality, at that point there is a loop back to IRCC and to the Immigration Services, and then there are certain procedures that are followed at that point.
quite a high threshold if they are here. But I'm just wondering, given that we know that this is widespread in Canada, this intimidation, from your perspective and your expertise, can we do anything to tighten the ability to prohibit these folks from getting into Canada? Because clearly folks are slipping through the cracks, is what I'm saying. Is there anything that can be done further? We're almost at time.
When the admissibility screening is done, decisions are made based on evidence of past behavior. Predicting future behavior is obviously a little bit more difficult.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the officials, and over to MP Chung.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment that I don't expect any response to. Based on the testimony we've heard today, the announcement last week by Minister Mendocino doesn't seem commensurate to the deteriorating situation in Hong Kong, nor does it seem commensurate to the response of our allies. For example, the United Kingdom provided a pathway for residency and citizenship for anyone in Hong Kong holding a British national overseas passport. The UK Home Office estimates that there are 2.9 million people, almost half of Hong Kong's population, who would be eligible for this pathway to residency and citizenship. I just wanted to put that on the record as a commentary on last week's announcement. I'd like to move on to the issue of granting visas by the IRCC. We all know that China is conducting covert and subversive operations in Canada. According to the Globe and Mail, agents from China's security services have traveled to Canada on tourist visas to engage in activities that are a threat to Canada's national security. In addition, last March, the government of Canada's National Security and Intelligence Committee said that China is targeting ethnocultural communities seeking to corrupt our political process, manipulate the media here in this country, and poses a significant threat to the rights and freedoms of Canadians. It also said that the Canadian National Security and Intelligence Committee, including the IRCC, is insufficiently coordinated in its response to this threat. So my question is simple. Has the IRCC made any changes since last March in how it is coordinating with other entities in Canada's national security and intelligence community?
Thank you very much for the question. So as you might imagine, we are continually looking for opportunities to strengthen our coordination with our partners across government, including with our partners in the security and intelligence community. And we are always also looking for ways to strengthen the way that admissibility and security screening and program integrity screening is ongoing. So it's certainly not something that's static. It's something that's dynamic and something that we're always seeking to improve across all of our lines of business.
And
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong and Ms. Dancho. And now we'll go to Ms. Yip for the last set of questions for 5 minutes.
With respect to the capacity, we've already heard about whether or not Canada is able to withstand the 300,000 Canadians moving back. Does IRCC have the technological resources to keep up with the increased applications and the general support needed?
So I can start, Mr. Chair, and my colleague may wish to add. In terms of capacity, what we're seeing, and I believe the Consul General confirmed this when he appeared, we currently do have the capacity for the demand that we are seeing. With the existing travel restrictions, Canadian citizens and permanent residents, of course, do have a right of entry. So there would be a flow there that would be enabled in the current context. I'll see if my colleague wishes.
My question is more to do with the technological resources. Do you have the technology able to process and quickly?
So in terms of the processing of applications, I will turn it to my colleague with regard to some of the innovations in that regard.
So we have been putting in place a number of innovations in order to increase our ability to process applications. The majority of our permanent residence applications are paper-based, which, as you can imagine, does pose certain limitations in terms of how quickly processing can take place. One of the public policies that was put in place as a response to COVID is that temporary resident applications, including for student permits, for example, are now being submitted online, with exceptions for those, of course, who have disabilities or might not be able to do online applications. And so that is certainly speeding up our ability to process these temporary residence visas and permits.
Are there any programs that will be, I guess, provided in the near future to help modernize this paper processing aspect? It seems kind of antiquated, especially since we're supposed to be, very much using technology to process quicker.
So this is something that is a very significant focus and priority for IRCC, is undergoing digital transformation of our systems. And it's something that is capturing a lot of our attention and our energy right now, as we're certainly looking for ways to speed up our digital transformation.
What measures is the IRCC taking to ensure that information systems it uses to process the immigration applications aren't vulnerable to compromise, including insider threats, just cyber security in general? Is it robust?
There's a number of systems that are put in place in multiple layers to ensure that the Privacy Act is respected, as well as to ensure that we're able to protect both against insider and outsider threats to the system. And there is close cooperation that happens with partners across government on this. This is not my area of expertise, however, so I would defer to my colleague who's in charge of digital transformation.
What are some of the resettlement pathways that Canada works with other countries? I believe, Ms. Kim, you had mentioned that in answering another question. If you could provide some specific examples.
Certainly. So primarily there is what we call the government-assisted refugee resettlement stream. And so for that stream, what we do is we work with the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, to receive referrals. And that stream really does focus on the most vulnerable and those at risk. And as part of it, those who arrive as permanent residents, and they receive 1 year of income support to enhance their integration while they adapt to a new life in Canada. Another stream would be what we call our privately sponsored refugees stream. So that's where private sponsors here in Canada can sponsor refugees, and they will arrive with the support of those private sponsors in Canada to help their integration pathway, but also provide income support. And I see the chair is saying it's out of time.
Thank you very much for recognizing the time signal. Thank you, Ms. Yip. Before I do want to thank Ms. Kim and Dr. Giles, but I also want to remind you that there are a number of items or questions members asked for. If you could provide those items at your earliest convenience, would be most appreciated, those answers. And with that, we do thank you for your appearance before the committee today, virtually, much appreciated. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Ceci complète notre...
Thank you very much, everyone. This ends our meeting for today. The meeting is now adjourned.